Hello, everyone. My name is Paul Allen, and I'm the CEO and co founder of Pinch Payments. In this presentation, I'm going to take you through what actually happens when you pitch. So, this is not based on any theory books, this is a real world example and my experience of what happens when you go through that process. So, I'm going to take you through three different stages. The first stage is what we started with. The second stage is really about what we changed based on feedback that we received early on, and stage number three is ultimately what it led to. And this is important because pitching isn't just one moment, it's a process. And often you'll iterate through stages one and stage two several times before you arrive on the ultimate pitch that results in stage three. So this is probably the most important slide that I wanted to present to you today. And it's a very simple message. Your first pitch won't be your best pitch. In fact, if we're being honest, it probably will be your worst pitch. But you know what? That's okay. Every founder goes through this. Everyone has to do this at some stage if they're seeking investment. And your first version is never the one that works. What matters really is how you handle the feedback. So our original idea at Pinch was a debt collection system. And we came up with this concept because we ourselves had experienced the problem that we were attempting to solve. I run a business where I constantly had customers paying me late. And so we decided, wouldn't it be great to implement a system that automatically followed up with your customers for payments that are overdue? So we decided to build that on top of Stripe and PayPal. And at that time, we thought it made a lot of sense. We leave the payment processes to process payment, and we focus on the workflow. So we felt pretty confident going into that first pitch that we had everything that we needed to secure the investment and roll off into the sunset together. So there was a turning point, a key turning point. I think the meeting lasted nearly an hour, maybe 60 minutes or so. And this one sentence really stood out to me. This would be more interesting if you owned the payments. And so for us, it completely changed how we looked at our business. Now, we certainly didn't say to that investor, oh, yeah, great idea, I'll pivot the business tomorrow, because that would probably raise alarm bells that you've not really thought about your business too much in the first place. So instead of making rash decisions like that, what I recommend is to take the feedback away and then address whether you think that that is something that you want to take on board. Now, there's two possible ways that you can handle it. The first one is to go on full-on defensive mode, and I've heard a lot of businesses pitch, and I'll have a question or I'll have a comment, and they immediately go into defensive mode. My idea is better because, my system does this better because. Well, I give better service. Those are some of the examples that I've heard in the past. And that may be true, but one thing that I would really advise you to do is to listen to the feedback that you receive. And not all feedback will be useful. You have to filter some of the feedback out. But if you ignore all feedback and you remain tunnel vision focused, then that's when problems can start to arise. So what we learned in that encounter was to drop the blinkers, turn off the tunnel vision, receive feedback, and take on board that feedback at a later date. The other key item here is that rejection does not mean no interest. Usually, unless your idea is really bad, rejection usually means that the person that you've pitched to does not necessarily understand either your business model or your product. And so clarification is then required. Just remember that you're not the expert yet. You may have built a great product, you may have a great idea, but you're not the subject matter expert. And so, especially when pitching to investors or when just having a conversation with people who are subject matter experts that have been in your industry that you're planning to disrupt for 20 to 30 years plus, really take that feedback on board. That was a mistake that I think that we did by not taking this into account early enough. And it was only that one investor who brought the same messaging up again that really caused us to think, okay, we really need to consider this now. And the final piece is that competition equals validation. If nobody else in the world is doing what you're doing, sometimes have a think about why. Is it because there isn't actually a market? Is it because the problem that you are trying to solve really doesn't need a solution? I can think of many different examples on Shark Tank where this has happened. Think that if somebody else is doing it and somebody has built a business, that you can too. Think that competitors in your market actually equals validation of your idea and that this has actually got legs. So after the initial feedback, we decided to refine the idea and we went back out this time thinking that we came around again much sharper. We came back with a much clearer story, and not only how are we going to build new customers, but also how are we going to generate more revenue from each customer. By coming back with a clearer story, we were able to articulate what we wanted from the investor, how we were going to spend their money, and how we were going to return their money to them in X number of years. And ultimately, this is what an investor wants to hear. So when choosing your investors, it's very important to do your research. One big lesson, not every investor is the right investor. In fact, 99% of investors out there probably aren't an ideal fit. So do your research. Do they operate in the same industry that you're wanting to launch your business in? Do they have prior experience with similar businesses? Does your business fit into their preferred portfolio? A lot of investors are not just out there looking for the next big thing, they're choosing very strategically. If you're talking to an angel investor, they might be wanting to build their portfolio to fund their retirement. If you're talking to a PE firm, they're generally trying to build their portfolio for very different reasons. They usually want to buy, scale massively, and sell within a few short years. Ensure that you are talking to an investor that aligns with your model and aligns with your vision. Probably most important for me, though, as I'm very much driven by relationships, is that you need to consider, is this person someone that you can see yourself working with long time? The pitch process is a two-way street. The investor will ask you a lot of questions. Some of them might even be personal. Most of them will be to try and explore whether you've really thought through this idea or not. You should ask the investor questions. You should gauge, is this someone that I can work with? Understand that your initial investor is most likely going to be a significant shareholder of your business. And most investors will want to be in a business for no shorter than 4 to 5 years. So they are a long-term relationship. And you've got to ensure that this person aligns not only professionally, but personally with your values, and that is someone that you believe in and believe that you can work with. So when it comes to preparing for your pitch, I think the most important thing here is to start to practice out loud. Now, I'm an introverted person. I'm a software engineer by trade. And so the thought of talking at a volume that I would only ever normally talk at when I'm in a nightclub, with only my dog as the audience, was, shall we say, not something that I was looking forward to. And to be honest, it felt pretty weird to start with. However, once you practice out loud in front of no one except for your poor dog, then you'll find that you build confidence, you can set tones correctly, and you start to sound less and less monotone and more engaging. Now, from that point onwards, really try and pitch in real rooms. If you're a member of a co-working space or other startup community, the chances are that there'll be pitch nights and other activities in order for you to really get involved in the community. Now do that. Stand up. Always pitch. You never know who's in the room. You never know how much advice you can get from other people that are also pitching that night. If you stand at the back and observe, you're not really learning much. So preparation really is your edge. In most pitch nights and for most investors, they see so many different businesses, all of which promise to change the world. If you come very well prepared, preparation on your numbers is absolutely fundamental. Again, we've all seen and see people get laughed out of Shark Tank because they don't know the difference between their revenue, their gross profit, and their net profit. These are fundamentals for anyone running a business. You really need to learn your numbers, and you really need to translate how that turns into investor return. Now, I think something that's more relevant now than ever is the use of AI to support your pitch. And that's key. Use AI to support your pitch, but do not let it replace you as a person. Investors are not investing into a machine, they're investing into a person. If you simply type a few notes up into AI and ask it to provide you a pitch, you're essentially commoditizing yourself because most of the people in the room are probably doing that as well. So use AI to support your pitch. Prepare AI with your individual persona. Prepare AI with your sense of humor so it understands what makes you tick. Again, humor on stage is always very effective, and you can't do that if you're copy and pasting it into AI. So, the revenue, that's why everyone's here. Here's two very quick messages that I think are very important. Ideas are interesting, but revenue is convincing. So this was a really big shift for us. Everyone's got a great idea, and everyone thinks that idea is going to change the world. But the harsh reality is that not everyone thinks about how they're going to pay the bills. What are they going to charge the customer? How are they going to upsell once they've got a customer on board? How are they going to retain that customer? How are they going to use the data that they are generating to attract more and retain more customers? This is what an investor wants to hear. They don't necessarily want to hear about how your idea is a great one. Really, they are there for one thing, and that's to get some return on their investment. And revenue shows how it works exactly, and that you've also thought about how that is going to execute. So, a somewhat harsh reality check for you. In my opinion, no revenue means more equity lost. So what do I mean by that? Well, if you approach an investor and you don't have paying customers, the investor is going to think, firstly, is this vaporware? Does this thing actually exist? Or is this person wanting my money to build this thing? Does this person actually have anything tangible here? Or have they used an AI model to build a proof of concept? Or have they actually thought about how this product works in the real world? You can't do that if your only customers are friends and family. And investors know that, and investors see that straight away. They see so many pitches from pre-revenue companies, and that will be their number one concern. So how do investors react to that? Do they just say no? Well, no, they don't. Investors invest in pre-revenue companies all the time. But what they will do is they'll consider you higher risk. And higher risk means that they're going to want more of your company for the same amount of money. And that's something that you should really consider carefully. So do I put my initial effort when I'm pre-revenue into getting my first revenue-paying clients? Or do I go and ask an investor for money at pre-revenue stage and risk losing more equity early on? My opinion is that will become very costly. When you inevitably realize your ambitions and the company has expanded significantly, you'll find that you have an initial investor who has a disproportionate amount of equity in the business. So the key takeaways is to show how value flows and then show how money flows. If you can bring on the first investor, particularly if you align on values, that investor will want to introduce you to more people. Now, if you've chosen your investor well, and they're also knowledgeable in the industry, that will lead to more opportunities for your business and more opportunities to speak to more investors, which means more opportunities, more networking, and a higher chance of receiving a Series 1 or a Series 2 investment as you go further down your line. But it all starts with one investor. If you can clearly show how value flows and money flows, then you can make that decision much easier. Thank you for your time, and I wish you well on your journey.